speech, we have Jeremy Sampson, the CEO of the Travel Foundation. We have Henry Carson, General Manager at Elite Hotels of Sweden, Elizabeth Dumeg, Head of Sustainability at ICOMIA, and Eden Cohen, CEO at Pick Up Beer and Chairman at Marine Innovation Association. A couple of house rules before we start. The webinar is recorded, as you have probably heard 1 minute ago. Then we ask you to kindly mute the microphones so that we don't have too much noise during the presentations. We ask you to elaborate your questions in writing in the chat, and my colleagues that I really thank for the help and support organizing the webinar from Green Key, from Blue Flag, will collect the questions, and they will be submitted to the panelists at the end of the webinar. So please don't be shy and ask the questions there. And there will be, as I was saying, a panel discussion at the end. So we will also have time for that. But without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Joaquin Diaz, who is the CEO of FEE Mexico and also board member of the Foundation for Environmental Education. He will give us a little bit of an opening speech and a welcome few words to start and open the dances of the webinar today. So Joaquin, the floor is yours.
Thank you everyone. Welcome to this initiative as part of the webinar series from the Foundation for Environmental Education, especially in the responsible consumption and in the tourism sector. Particularly considering the concerns tackled by Blue Flag and Green Key programs, and aiming to mitigate the negative environmental impact in the tourism sector, and searching the tools, the better tools to embrace a green transition in our sites. I mean, beaches, restaurants, hotels, and general establishments around the world. FEE is trying to involve every day the stakeholders of more than 3,000 Green Key awarded sites, establishments around the world, more than 4,500 Blue Flag sites, hosting 20,000 environmental education activities each year. And of course, considering the over more than 8 million people visiting Blue Flag awarded sites, we are aware of the need to reconsider the way that they consume and the products they source, and keeping in mind the principles underlying the 4 Rs. We expect in this webinar, in this series, especially in this day, the speakers can show and highlight the importance of building sustainable purchasing policies, of considering the impacts of the supply chains, for example, across the entire life cycle of the products, services, and looking for eco-friendly and promoting certified materials for tourism operations. Our goals support the commitment that we, the Foundation for Environmental Education, are making to tackle the 3 major environmental priorities of present times with the current generations to have a better future. Our strategic plan is based on our dedication towards reversing environmental damage in a real and meaningful way. We are building in our past successes with a strategy designed to deliver true change. Our performance indicators and metrics will support us in monitoring and evaluating the success of our goals. Empower climate action, protect global biodiversity, and reduce environmental pollution. Welcome again. And please, if you agree, Alessandro, we will start with the presentation. It's a very brief presentation. Yeah, you're muted, Alessandro.
You're muted.
Whoopsie, that happens when you have so many screens open at the same time. But thank you, Joaquin, for the very inspiring word and for opening the dances, so to speak. So I will introduce immediately the next speaker today, the guest, Jeremy Sampson. He's the CEO at the Travel Foundation. He worked closely on the Glasgow Declaration for the Decarbonization of the tourism sector. So Jeremy, the floor is yours. Here is your presentation. Let me go to full screen. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see everyone, and a great pleasure to be here today. I was invited to provide just some global perspective on sort of the state of play in the tourism industry, particularly related to climate change, climate action, but of course to the broader theme of sustainable consumption. And it's been a really interesting couple of years with a lot of sort of acceleration of action and big challenges ahead as well. So I'm here just to provide a snapshot and some ideas and hopefully some inspiration too about the work happening on these issues globally. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I have the great pleasure of traveling around the world, providing keynote speeches and presentations in lots of different destinations. In the last year and a half, I started playing with an idea of calling my presentations Adapt or Die. And the idea was to be a little bit provocative, a little bit eye-opening. And the tourism industry, I'm afraid, has not always been I think aligned with this sort of provocation. There's been quite a lot of business as usual, quite a lot of sort of growth without consideration necessarily around the other side of the equation. Not necessarily against growth just as a default, but certainly an advocate for looking at the whole picture and balancing the needs of various stakeholders, including communities and the environment, with economic progress. And so the idea of Adapt or Die was to shake things up a little bit and to start to accelerate the response of the industry around some of the big challenges we're facing. And while I believe the name Adapt or Die was a bit dramatic, I think actually if we take a step back, we realize that we're in quite dramatic times. And of course, the pandemic, just a couple of years old now. And although it seems to be fading slowly in our memories, I think in our bodies, it's codified now as a risk that will continue into the future, and something that we always know could be possible again. Geopolitical crises, unstable economies, lots of just ups and downs when it comes to the global supply chain. At the Travel Foundation, we've highlighted two areas that we believe are most sort of the most critical drivers of change and will continue to be the drivers of change in travel and tourism. The first one we called the equity crisis because, indeed, as much as climate is a crisis, I think inequity of travel and tourism in many places can also be considered a crisis, and not only travel and tourism, but of the global economy. High concentration of benefits in smaller and smaller amount of companies, less of that reaching destination communities, and even less reaching vulnerable communities. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. The travel and tourism industry has an opportunity to be extremely inclusive, holistic, and representative when it comes to diversity, given the diversity of the sector and the many places within which we operate. But increasingly, it seems tourism, it can find itself being a little bit heterogeneous. Workforce is a challenge everywhere. Housing is a challenge anywhere. And again, these are not necessarily tourism only problems, but they do create significant problems, significant challenges for destinations who are dependent on the sort of short-term labor or bringing in labor from elsewhere for tourism jobs, when there's no housing, when people are actually questioning the impact of the industry. Again, I work in the industry because I believe it's the industry is one, if not the primary source of potential for transforming the global supply chain and communities, but it doesn't happen without some intentionality. It doesn't just happen by showing up and by default. So we believe that it's important for tourism to take a step back and think, well, how is it that we will start to address these questions of equity? And if you go to the next slide, also what the UN has called our triple planetary crisis. So that of significant plastics in the ocean, decrease in biodiversity everywhere, and the climate emergency in which we find ourselves. So all of these challenges, of course, also sit on top of tourism. They are not tourism only thematic areas. But if you think of it in two ways, on the one hand, tourism obviously contributes a significant percentage to these challenges. And the question remains, how can tourism shift that percentage to be a net positive and a positive contributor towards climate solutions, towards genuine sort of equity and representation in the industry. And on the other hand, there's the question of how will these changes affect tourism itself, its viability long-term in the global economy? Will mass tourism become a relic of the past in ways that other behaviors have become because of pressure from communities, pressure from environmental lobby groups, pressure from the supply chain itself, and pressure from visitors and travelers who are increasingly making different decisions and voting with purchasing travel with their values. In the next slide, please. So I think the question for anyone working in tourism and a question to ask not only the sort of global tourism sector, but also a question to ask yourself as an individual entity. Maybe you are a network, maybe you're a destination management organization, maybe you're a company with a small footprint, maybe you're a multinational company, but I think the question is relevant first for tourism alone, which is in asking these questions about what does success look like and how do we redefine success? And then there you can start to ask the question about what role tourism will play in achieving those outcomes. But until that formula sort of works better and is well communicated, I think it's difficult for the tourism sector to get into to get out of the silo that it exists in and advocating for different kinds of resources and different kinds of capacity to achieve new things. But we'll come back to capacity building in a moment, but I just think it's a nice reflection for everyone to think, okay, what role does tourism play here in our destination? Why do we have it? And what is our role in protecting that why? And that's a really nice framework for that discussion. Next slide, please. I think also there's been lots of debate and questions, and frankly, some of them making me feel a little crazy at times, trying to define words like sustainability, again, in the context of tourism, words like regeneration, transformation. We've all been guilty of it. And I think my feeling here is that actually the labels have started to become a bit unuseful in some ways. And it coincides with a time where demand for sustainable travel or sustainable tourism or sustainable products is increasing significantly, not because they're called sustainable, by the way, because they're called things like a great local experience where everything is procured 0 kilometer, or a particularly strong set of infrastructure, that sort of thing that actually will withstand the projected growth in tourism. I think there's lots of ways to think about sustainability, but ultimately sustainability as a system, it's not a product, it's not a label that necessarily should be thrown on an experience per se, because who's to say if that experience itself is viable? I think what we're facing as the industry gets ready, even more so through the great work that Travelist has done and its partner companies at Expedia, Booking.com, Skyscanner, is to put out some aligned frameworks that allow for consumers once and for all to have a single notion of what good looks like. We've never really done a good job of making that bridge to communicating with visitors, both before they arrive and on the ground. But also from the perspective of the communities that are serving these travelers. What is their perspective on on the industry's position within their community. How do they feel, and how do they have a voice and a way of engaging in in the overall decision making and governance of a place. And when it comes to defining sustainable, since everyone has a different way of looking at it, I think it's interesting that we actually have quite a bit more nuance than many people often realize. Sustainability not being just a checkbox or a yes or no. I think it's interesting to think in some of our research, we've defined and done research that I think has challenged some of the traditional assumptions around what sustainable looks like. In our Invisible Burden report published just a couple of years ago, we found actually that in Tenerife and the Canary Islands, that short-term rental properties were, were actually generating less economic benefit in some ways for the local economy, but were amazing at spreading out those benefits. And we found that 5-star luxury hotels were not so good at spreading around those benefits, and also were costing the community significant amounts of infrastructure, from an infrastructure perspective and from a wastewater and energy provision perspective. So when you started to look at the costs versus the benefits and looked at them holistically with sort of different dimensions, it became clear that something that might be considered a sustainable hotel, for example, very eco-friendly, has done all its work around efficiency, is not necessarily providing a sustainability from a system perspective in other areas, and vice versa. Backpacker hotels that may be not necessarily providing the same economic return on investment may actually be some of the most efficient to run, and again, spread people out in a way that is quite equitable within the community. So I think it comes back to defining what success looks like, and not just falling into the trap of using the same labels over and over. Next slide, please. I think one of the most important things that I see happening in tourism now, in the tourism sector, and in every sector of tourism as well, is the idea that people are coming around to, that fragmentation in the industry is not has not necessarily been well, in some ways, fragmentation has been really challenging for the industry, but I think for many, it's also been quite convenient, because businesses are able to say, I did my part, I did my job, I've become a sustainable business, I've done all the right things, and we go off and do our thing. DMOs or destinations are increasingly doing the same, but without looking necessarily at the broader ecosystem that they are involved in. So it's not necessarily a criticism, rather the thinking in a systems way, I think begins to unlock the potential for seeing leadership on the bigger picture, which is, what is it that we could do if we had aligned targets, goals, and opportunities, and we were able to pool resources and attention and ideas and expertise in a way that actually helped to achieve collective action at scale. And the issues that we've talked about so far, these issues that sit above all of us, we know that they will require action at scale, and not just everyone lining up to contribute their individual effort, but identifying those things that can be greater than the sum of its parts. There's where we will begin to see leadership on a bigger picture. And if you can move to the next slide, please. Skip that one because it just addressed my point. I was a little behind. And just to summarize this section, we believe that there are sort of 3 key areas that any tourism entity could start to look at carefully in the near future in order to define, in order to start moving forward towards a model that will service the growing challenges around climate, the state of play around equity, and viable long-term economic growth. Those are, number 1, redefining success, so identifying those balanced key performance indicators. Number 2, understanding as much as possible what are the risks and opportunities, but particularly the risks facing your business, your community, your subsector, your industry as a whole, and making sure that there is a prioritization of budgets that happens in line with that sense of risk. Because I think when you're looking at really holistic frameworks around sustainability, around climate, it's sort of easy in a way to tick off a lot of things and say, we're doing a great job, look at our scorecard. it's more important actually from my perspective to identify the things that are the biggest blockers or the biggest opportunities for change and scaling them quickly. And that's going to require different kinds of work, working collectively, but I believe it is probably the only way forward. And our industry has not necessarily been all that great over the years at finding that meaningful collaboration point. And this is one of the things that gives me hope in the current context. Okay, so just to move into the next section, we'll just finish with a couple of comments here around the drivers of change that are significantly affecting and accelerating change within the sphere that I've been describing today. You know, we do see that travelers' values are changing quite significantly with Generation Z, Generation Z coming more into purchasing power. This is a generation that is voting, that is purchasing with its values, and has so far really stuck to those values, and in many ways is changing the game. It will be really interesting to see how the next years proceed for the industry, which again I think has gotten really comfortable in many ways with an existing type of product that may not be viable into the future necessarily. Not to say it won't, or there may not be a different sort of mix, but I think there is attention being paid now to how to diversify to deliver on a variety of different needs. Communities we talked about, but I think are exceedingly unlikely to remain out of the picture for long in places where tourism is affecting everyone's day to day. The media, I think is increasingly part of this ecosystem. We're working right now with a couple of different media entities on their own plan and their own strategy for how they talk about climate and tourism. This is really important for us to do, we thought, because we want to be able to help the DMOs and even the PR folks who are operating within the businesses that are Glasgow Declaration signatories. We want to be able to give them that information on how to best align with media, with content creators, and make sure that media is receiving that information in a way, ideally directly, but in a way that helps them understand what the evolving challenges are and talk about what some of the sticky issues might be. Certainly investors are, changing the game as well, with new requirements around sustainability all the time, and climate in particular. Climate change is probably from an insurance perspective, the number one year-on-year growth in terms of expense costs in many companies who are larger scale, but have much of their infrastructure based in coastal communities that is at threat from climate change. And finally, policy level engagement, we're starting to see in places like the European Union, one of the most progressive, I think, globally in terms of travel and tourism, new pathways that will unlock new policies that for the first time will take a really hard look at, we'll take a really, really hard look at what it means to deliver on a model that is quality over quantity, and how to achieve the same sort of long-term objectives for the EU and its communities, robust economic value, but not at all costs. And I think that's really going to be interesting how that document and guidance turns into policy frameworks at the country level. I'm just going to move quickly through because I know I'm running a little bit behind, but if we go to the next slide, just to talk to you a little bit about a couple of initiatives that have taken place over the last couple of years, which provide opportunity for anyone within or tangential to tourism to engage. The first one is the Future of Tourism Coalition, which I'm the chair of. We initiated this in 2020, just around the time of COVID. A big, giant collaboration among many nonprofit organizations in the industry to begin to work together and have a shared voice for change. We published 13 guiding principles for that to define what that future looked like. It was COVID, we were talking about building back better. And so we wanted to clarify what we thought that better meant. There are opportunities there to become a signatory and to have access right away to tools and resources that are being provided by the nonprofit collaborative to support your efforts. Excuse me. And then at COP26 in Scotland, we had the great opportunity to join up the Travel Foundation with a couple other entities. Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency, Visit Scotland, UNEP and UNWTO to design and launched the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action and Tourism. If you go to the next slide, we have more than 700 signatories to the Glasgow Declaration so far, and we're starting to now get the first round of reporting from those who have made the commitment to the declaration. The next slide, please. The Glasgow Declaration signatories commit essentially to aligning with the same goals as are set out in the Paris Agreement. That means commitment to decarbonizing the sector by half by 2030 as our contribution to the global goals, and reaching net zero as a sector by 2050, if not later. If not earlier. We think that it was really important that signatories not only have the sort of pledge aspect, but would be reporting on their progress on an annual basis. And we're providing now some of the guidance, tools, and capacity building to help that capacity grow across the industry. And it's been quite remarkable to see the evolution and how much more sort of engagement and interest there's been from the sector over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. For those who are developing climate action plans, according to Glasgow, there are 5 pathways to align with: measure, decarbonize, regenerate, collaborate, and finance. The regenerate piece is about, as much as anything, adaptation, recognizing that in the global south, but even in communities all over the world, this is not just a decarbonization conversation. There is already a need to adapt to changing nature. And there is opportunity to utilize tourism to be a leader in that sort of thinking as well. And collaborate and finance are there to say, hey, we must do this together, and we must advocate for new levels and types of funding in order to get there. Next slide, please. Just to quickly give an overview of the most recent report that we launched. If you haven't read it yet, it is available for download on our site, and the link is there just on the screen. Our new report is called Envisioning Tourism in 2030 and Beyond. And I'm not going to go through all the slides now. Some of them are quite laid out in detail in the report itself. But to share that the main idea of this report was to study the compatibility between business as usual growth in travel and tourism and the climate targets that we've asked people to sign up to. And although it was difficult, if not impossible, to find a compatible scenario with 2030, which is coming up quite soon, we did feel it was a positive and hopeful note that for 2050, we were able to come up with one scenario that and this was actually using a simulator designed by our friends in the Netherlands at Breda University. And the idea here was to design a number of variables that could play out in a scenario plan and demonstrate how the sector could achieve the net zero target and at the same time grow according to business as usual. We found one, which is good. That one includes heavy investment in infrastructure, more global coordination than ever before, generally more investment than the industry has ever seen in its future. But I believe if we can be good about advocating for why this opportunity exists for tourism and how we can leverage how we can leverage the narrative about tourism's role in catalyzing change to generate more funding and more investment in the resources that we need to grow and also transform and evolve the sector. And Francesco, no problem, we'll wrap it up. So there is a lot to see here in this report. What I hope people take away from this, in addition to the fact that it's not time to give up, there's a huge opportunity for action. On top of that, I believe that it's important as a wake-up call to understand that even in the scenario we found, the scenario would look different. There would be for example, a need to be a cap on the growth of long-haul travel during a period of time in which the airline industry has not yet been able to decarbonize at scale. There would need to be a bit of sticker shock for travelers. Unfortunately, travel may become a bit more elite during this period of time. People may be taking lots more trips close to home, or taking only one longer trip over the course of a year and spending more time and more money in a place. So there are winners, losers, and everything in between in these changing scenarios. But to me, the main message is prepare for change, because I doubt it will look the same as it has over the last several years going into 2030 and beyond. If we could just skip a few slides, I'm going to get to the close here. I'll tell you when. Keep going, keep going. Here, we can, that's okay. So yeah, let's do this one, what we need to do now, the next slide. If you don't mind, yeah. So what we need to do now, I think just as an entity in tourism, there's also lots to think about here. You know, what is it that individual organizations can do now, and what can we collectively do to bring these kinds of hopeful scenarios to life? Supporting a call for global coordination of policies, ensuring that emissions is reported on in a transparent way, including the transportation piece that is fully accounted for in tourism plans and strategies. Start working on new tourism options, low emissions, zero emissions, not using offsetting for those itinerary designs, but thinking, how do we really strip unnecessary material out of the sector and do it in a way that perhaps benefits us from an innovation perspective? Better understand and plan for how tourism will operate in a changing world, and everybody is welcome to sign, implement, and join the growing community of signatories on the Glasgow Declaration. And if we can go to the slide 25, that'll be my last one. I also encourage everyone to think about what leadership looks like in your paradigm, and leadership can look differently for every kind of organization, every kind of individual. But I think if we start thinking collectively and thinking about how to leverage leadership opportunity within specific places, you can see that there's a lot of opportunity for the sector to continue to transform in a positive direction, to be innovative, to be working closely with travelers and communities to meet their needs, to create resilience funds that really support climate justice and help and support the fairness and equity of helping the global south to address the very serious effects that are already taking place, and in many cases where the global north actually were the polluters who created some of these problems. So I hope everyone will just take a bit of time to reflect. What is your own role? Who is it that you work with or alongside that you could catalyze? And let's see continued accelerated leadership going into the future. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the very inspiring words. And I've been taking notes because it was really captivating. And I think first I was really impressed with this adapt or die kind of rhetoric. And I think my best wish for the participants of the webinar today is that they take home messages on how to adapt within the tourism sector and do their part in the sustainable transition. You also touched upon the many dimensions of sustainability, that it's not just the environmental, of course, but it also touches upon the social dimension, the economic dimension. And I'm really looking forward to the next part of this panel, because you also touched upon the need to move to think in a wider sense. You talked about the fragmentation that is happening within the sector. And now with the next speaker, Henrik Carson, General Manager and Head of Sustainability at the Elite Hotel Group of Sweden, we can really start thinking of how sustainability takes place and responsible consumption takes place in a chain of hotels, for example, right? So when we start thinking of a network and not just the individual establishments, but we start thinking of a wider situation with different local realities, so to speak, and we need to really start thinking of how we adapt solutions to different contexts. So I won't steal much more time. Henrik, the floor is yours. Thank you, Jeremy, for your part. And Henrik, looking forward to hearing from you. Let's see, this is your slide. Here you are.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon here from today, where the sun is Sweden. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about responsible consumption and the edge that we, Elite Hotels of Sweden, is taken into the new century. And to start with, Jeremy, thank you very much for your effort here and the very inspirational part and the important take that Travel Foundation take in in this kind of work. Well, I'm working as a general manager for 2 hotels within this hotel group. We have 40 hotels over the country, and I'm also is group head of sustainability. As it is not an understatement to say that we are a part of the Swedish heritage. And as you can see on the pictures, most of our hotels are cities, grand old ladies, and really an establishment in each city. And of course, this is it's an advantage when it comes to knowledge and reputation of the hotels. However, you can see it's several very older buildings, and it needs as well a very true effort to ensure that we are up to date when it comes to sustainability and responsible business. I could also say that that is both to operations part and as well when it comes to property management, because this is the way the world is looking like. Everything isn't newly built. You can change the slides, and just a quick background about the hotel here. And the chain that was founded by Vicky Chakraborty is origin from India. His vision was to restoring beautiful hotels in Sweden to the former glory, and this is carried on through his daughter. Vicky passed away last year, and now it's his only owner, Caroline Chakraborty, that is taking care and run the business. And then you should see us as, even if we're a quite large company, we are a family affair, and it's not public listing or anything like them. We continue with the take for create hotel experience, you can say, with the goal of making them to the city's natural point. And an important thing which I just said there on that page was also that our core values is tradition, quality, and flair. And Jeremy, you speak a little bit about 5-star hotels. Now we are on a typical 4 or 5-star level, 4-star. But I'm sure you all get the points, how to live a great guest experience within these 3 core values and combine that with responsible consumption business in the same way can be quite challenged. Now I'm ready to just drop the picture. Thank you. That is one of our oldest hotels in north of Sweden. And I think when I speak to other hoteliers and so on, I think it's really important for us to decide for the establishment what is sustainability, because when you have decided that, and I think Jeremy had a good take on this as well, there are many ideas, the different stakeholders, think tanks, governments, and of course the consumers who say that that decide what is sustainable for them. And especially today when we speak about greenwashing, consumers' behaviors, competitiveness, I should say the sustainability is really a huge topic everywhere. And of course, there are so many opinions about sustainability. So I think we need to, as a company today, you really need to ground, and you need to ensure that the entire company knows what should be your definition. And we say that we say that for us, it's still meeting the needs of present generation without comparison to the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it was already back in 1987 with Gro Harlem Brundtland and the Commission of UN that set in. And for us, I think this is still valid. And then you can spread, then you can do the sustainability part a little bit more wider. For us, it's really like many of our hotels and buildings has been standing over 100 years as solid rocks, I should say. And it's the same take we have when we do business and when it comes to responsibility consumption, because we want those buildings and our guests and everyone, we want them to stand at least 100 years more. We can take the next picture, and I will just very short tell you about what you can do when you build something new. This is the Wood Hotel in Skellefteå. It's also a part of the Elite Hotels chain. It's in one of the really northern part of Sweden. It's opening in late 2021. This is one of the world's most sustainable hotels. It's actually built completely with wood, which contributes the entire building to being climate positive. And in general, I would say that the construction and the real estate sector contributes to a little bit above 20% of this the CO2 emissions per year in Sweden. So of course the property and construction real estate is very important to work with, and therefore in this hotel when we did everything from the beginning, we had all heatings, cooling, ventilations. Everything is completely natural, climate neutral. That means that we minimize the consumption of energy, and the building itself, as I said, is made by wood. So it's a construction that's absorbed actually more CO2 than its use than the building itself using. So that's a great thing what you can do when you build something new. But as I told you, we are very proud of the hotel and the efforts, to bring it into our brand. And here you can really think about sustainability from wheat to bread. When you from the little things you're doing to the actually it's the end to the consumer. We can take the next picture. On this page, I will talk a little bit about guest comfort. And as I told before, we would like to deliver a great guest experience with tradition, quality, and flair. We really need to work with these options that we do have for our guests, because we don't want to remove services or offerings just to save costs, and we will of course want to be so sustainable as we can. Therefore, we have decided to invest in amenities that are eco-friendly, made of reused paper, remove plastic as much as we can, and still have amenities and service offering for guests, even if the amenities are more expensive. For example, we're putting a new textile line, for example, then we will only have eco textiles. It's extremely more expensive, but the take we have is that we want to ensure that guests should have a great comfort, and when to stay with us, they should have a great confidence, knowing that we are do our utmost, both to deliver a great guest comfort, but also helping the guests to be a responsible consumer on the same time. And of course, even if it's not so cost efficiency, we think that if you're looking to the end, and if you have a 100-year plan as we have, this will come out on the other side when it comes to both profit and to revenue, of course. Next picture, please. I will just, and as many of you maybe know, that we have decided to be a part of Green Key. And I don't need to tell so much about Green Key, but what I would like to say that we are very, very happy to work with the requirements, the rule of improvements, and the development that's all the time happens with Green Key, and this is it's a really green key. It's a key part of our businesses, and we use actually certification as one of the fundamentals of everything we are doing, and this has just been changing for the last couple of years. So it's a very important thing in all the decisions. We should always have the sustainable thinking, but we should also rely on Green Key, always ensure that we are up to level and that we can do and develop ourselves each year. So that it's just great. In addition to this, we did we have decided to have our own statements regarding the Agenda 2030 to ensure a better world and a future for the next generation. I will have a look into the Glasgow thing that I have been reading about, and see how should we do that. But we also think that this agenda it's very important to work with that as well, and not only with one part when it comes to the sustainability. If we take the next picture, in a hotel chain with our a hotel chain with 40 hotels, we have a very small head office actually, because we are taking the decision making so close as possible we can to the consumer. So even if we have a global appeal, we will not forget about the local conditions, because one thing that works maybe in Gothenburg, it's not working in Malmö, Kiruna, or in Stockholm. And we also think if we forget about the local conditions, we will absolutely get lost in our work to embrace the sustainability thing. And there is the local general manager that is responsible for sustainable work together with their teams, and we have seen this as a great advantage, especially when it comes to empowerment, because empowerment is it's very important, and to get influence by our team members, because that is the way we can do things better. And local hotels also get the possibilities to set up and support their own social responsibility in context of just to say their own municipality and their city. And Sweden is a very long country, and that what is happens in the south, it's maybe not the best thing to do in the north. We can change the picture, and I will just talking about a little bit about improvements, and just to have this in mind, that we always start to do and working with improvements, both when it comes to services and offerings, but I should also say that it comes to our operations and property management. And then of course, sustainability is always a topic to work with when it comes to improvements. And you know, in hotel business or in the industry, you are never better than the latest feedback you got from a guest. And if we look back to the COVID pandemic, of course, this has changed the mindset of the industry in total, and also the mindset on how we are working on with tourism in general. When I say it also, when we talk about improvements, it's also like the life cycle of products and services is also very important for us to know. You talked about a little bit just about the life cycle, Jeremy, and that is, it's also something that we are looking into when we do changes and improvements. And it's not good enough today for us that products are up to the standards of today. It needs to be up to the standards for tomorrow. And here, sometimes I can see that there are problems for suppliers actually to get what we need to have. We have been seeing for the latest years, the latest year, only half year actually, a quite large change in what our suppliers offering. For example, now when we do renovation for a hotel, we purchase high quality furnitures and products because we want them to live longer. And we also like to mix match between properties. For example, art is one thing that is, maybe it's not an expensive art, but where it feels old and maybe not so up to date somewhere, it gets a totally new life somewhere else. And that is also to change furnitures and worn out, renovate them and try them to keep for a long time. And I know several hotels or establishments that actually go for cheaper products and need to get rid of them just some years later, because you think maybe they are not up to design, or they are just totally worn out, I should say. As this goes a little bit hand in hand with the era of boutique hotels, design hotels, the fast-growing chains and properties that need to be updated and feel a bit fresh. And I think that is also the that's also can we see here, that's also a little bit about sorry, I just get a message here. Sorry, I keep that for later. Thank you. Well, you can see also that I think hotel guests in general and people in general, they are also looking to change things. You know, if you look in Sweden, you do have IKEA. When I was born up, you have got one catalog of IKEA furnitures, and then you get a new one each year. Now each month they are giving new products. Next thing, I will just comment a little bit about our suppliers, and I would recommend, and you can change pictures. When it comes to the suppliers, I recommend everyone to have a clear code of conduct. So suppliers need to sign up to become a supplier to the company, and this is actually include all the aspects of sustainability, responsibility business, and also to grant if you have a no child labor, social exploitations, and labor, I should say as well. And we have typical that our guests, they really demands a high take on sustainability, and therefore we also need to demand this from our suppliers and the product and services, and challenge them a little bit. If we go to the next picture, I just said a little bit about the climate footprint, and of course we need to have really good and clear paths on how to measure this. I think from the beginning, it's really like you're looking in the it's the fundamentals of our business in general. You're looking like industries and factories, and you know where they develop things, but how can you actually calculate this on services? And that is, it's really we need to look at what Jeremy told us about, and to see how can we do this better in our way in general. We have started, of course, to do this, but I think we need to further on. One of the last important things, the next picture, it's really to forget we are not we can't forget that we are working with people, and therefore we need to have the entire team in the process, where everyone should take responsibility, because it's the small things that actually can I think change the world. The time it's not out, but for us in the service sector is also guests and consumers. So should we have signs where we please do not take a bath when it's using a lot of energy, or not use any water when you brush your teeth? Or shouldn't we in Scandinavia, for example, provide melons and exotic fruits? I'm sure if I remove melons, and I have tried it on one of the breakfast buffets, guests complain that there is no fruit, and then you need to be a little bit more to really develop that we have seasonal fruits and so on, and that is really difficult where depending on where you are in the world. So I think what we have to do is to help people to be better, and we need to like have the if you say we need to have a very strong effort to help our guests, but the guest needs to decide a little bit by themselves what they want to do, so they can do thoughtful choices and really be confident in our business. And then we also need to keep if you look at the supply chain, this needs to be transparent. We need to have it thoughtful, and we need to try to have so much local produce of food that we can have and help guests to sort waste and so on. But we can't really demand every guest to do exactly as we want, because then the chain and efforts will be difficult. We need to ensure that they rely on that we as company, if I look at my company, but also other companies, we should do everything we can and help the guests to be
Henrik, do you think we can start wrapping up?
And I should just say that to the end here, we have a 100-year plan, and therefore we want to be here in 100 years more, and therefore we need to have a 100-year plan, and it's very, very nice to have when we're looking into sustainability in general. But okay, thank you very much. I think I got my 20 minutes now anyway, and thank you for listening and letting me to share the take on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the incredible experience of Elite. That was very interesting and very grounded also, so we can explore concrete solutions really to bring responsible consumption. And it's also very interesting to see how hotels can be both in contact with the end consumer on one way to provide a service, but also they themselves are consumers and are in touch with suppliers and can affect offer by driving a more sustainable kind of demand. So thank you again, Henrik, for your contribution. I would like now to introduce the next speaker for the day, that is Elisabeth Dumergue. She's head of sustainability at ICOMIA. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us. Of course, I will not steal any more time from you. And here you have the floor. Let me share your slide. Here you are.
Well, thank you very much. And it was really interesting listening to those other speakers. I think Jeremy and Hendrik made some really interesting points. And it's good to see that they're taking a much broader interpretation of sustainability than just environmental. I think it's good to remember that sustainability is also underpinned by social sustainability. So it's really positive to see that. And I must admit, I'm now looking for, I think I'm going to book a trip to Sweden and stay in one of those hotels. Because how amazing to stay in a hotel that's entirely made out of wood. Just as a bit of a background, I'm head of sustainability at ICOMIA. ICOMIA stands for the International Council of Marine Industry Associations. And so we represent, we're a trade association, and we represent the trade associations in individual countries that represent the recreational marine industry in their countries. Our members also include marina companies and other companies that are associated with the recreational boating industry, such as everything from personal watercraft, so your kayaks, through to your super yachts. And trust me, there's a lot of stuff in between. In fact, obviously, most boats fall somewhere in between. So if you look at the next slide, there's a quote from Bloomberg where they say, and this is with regard to sustainability and environmental issues, that there are tangible risks for companies that don't take action. So I think that's a real call to arms that we all need to make sure that we're on top of sustainability. So I'm going to, in this talk, I'm going to briefly talk about how we are mapping the sustainability development goals that were produced by the UN through to marinas, but that would translate through to other companies, including to hotels as well. So on the next slide, this is the global risks that have been ranked over the short and long term. So you can see on the left-hand side, this is a survey of what companies perceive the risks are going to be over the next 2 years. And you'll see that it is very much dominated by the cost of living. But then over 10 years, what dominates the risk, perceived risk, is climate action failure. So what is going to happen if we don't address climate action and climate, the crisis that is coming down the line? So we can see that companies are going to have to move to doing more around climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. So on the next slide, there are the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this is, you're probably very familiar with this. These were produced, we are now halfway through, so they were produced in 2015. The aim is to have them met by 2030. Sadly, the planet is not on track to meet them. So how can we track and map what we do in tourism or in marinas or in hotels to ensure that we are meeting what we can do to meet the Sustainable Development Goals? So the ones I'm going to talk about just very briefly are number 6, which is water, number 8, which is around decent work, number 11, which is around sustainable cities, 12, which is around sustainable consumption, 13, which is climate change action, 14, life below water, and then 15, life on land. So looking at number 6, the clean water. So with each climate goal, there are 17 sustainable development goals. Underneath those, there are 169 targets, and underneath those, there are 231 unique indicators. So looking at number 6, regarding water, you'll see that I picked out target 6.3, and that is to improve water quality by reducing pollution and trying to reduce the release of hazardous chemicals and materials into water by better treating wastewater and by increasing recycling. Now, under that, as I say, sit various indicators, but the two that match up to what marinas do, and I think arguably match up to what a hotel's doing, is making sure that you are treating domestic and industrial wastewater flows safely. So what does that actually mean on it? What can you do? So on a day-to-day basis for a company, that would mean assessing your organization's water footprint. What steps can you take to lower this? And then making sure that you have in place appropriate measures to help prevent water pollution. So on the next one, the next slide, there are some further targets that fall under the clean water. So what can companies do to make sure that they hit these targets? So that's making sure you take steps to achieve or improve water efficiency, make sure that water isn't wasted. It's making sure that you fix leaky pipes, making sure that your infrastructure is appropriate. It's making sure that you have appropriate waste and hazardous materials management so that surface and groundwater aren't contaminated. So it's not just looking at your water infrastructure, it's looking at your waste management more generally. And then of course, it's making sure that you reduce your water use if you can. So number 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals is decent work and economic growth. And I think this was touched on quite well by Hendrik and by Jeremy, that this is where some of the social sustainability comes in. And Hendrik talked about it when he mentioned about having a code of conduct. So this is things like creating and implementing a code of conduct that aims to prevent forced labor, child labor, and modern slavery in your supply chains. You might say, hang on, we don't have any forced labor, we don't have any child labor in our supply chains. It's not a problem for us. So I'll use an example from my previous company. I used to work in a company that owned battery storage facilities around the world. So in order to enable the transition to a green economy, we need to have renewable energy. So solar energy, wind energy, things like that. But it's not always sunny. I'm in England at the moment, but amazingly, it is actually sunny in England. But it's not always windy, it's not always sunny, it gets dark. So what do you do when you don't have any solar and you don't have any wind generation? Well, if you've got batteries to store the energy that is being produced when it has been sunny and it has been windy, then that battery can then discharge the energy back into the national grid when it's needed. Now, those batteries, like batteries in Tesla cars, like batteries in other electric vehicles, like batteries in your mobile phones, in electric boats, generally contain rare earth metals. So they are generally lithium-ion batteries, and lithium-ion batteries have about 4 different sorts of chemicals in them, 4 different types of chemicals, one of which is cobalt. Cobalt, about 75% of the world's cobalt is mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, sadly, the Democratic Republic of Congo doesn't have the human rights frameworks. It doesn't have the employee rights that I would have here in the United Kingdom, or that I would have had when you may have detected from my accent, I'm a New Zealander, that I would have had when I was living and working in New Zealand. So what can you do in your supply chains? So what I did in my previous role was you have to look back through the supply chains. When you are buying products, are you making sure that those organizations from which you are buying products have got responsible supply chains? Have they got a code of conduct so that they are buying from responsible organizations? So those are some of the practical steps you can do to make sure that, for instance, number 8 in the Sustainable Development Goals are met. So for number 11, for marinas, this is around, one of the targets is around road safety and being able to provide safe transport. So, and this goes back to, there was a question in the chat box around what we're doing for making sure that tourism is sustainable for people with disabilities. So one of the things that I would be asking marinas, and I think be asking hotels, is, well, if you have public transport, so in marinas that might be water taxis, how accessible are those water taxis? And if they're not fully accessible, what are you doing about it? What is your plan to make sure that those are going to be fully accessible so that everyone can access the ocean and everyone can access your marina? Number 12, responsible consumption and production. So I think broadly speaking, this is what we've been talking about today. Tracking your hazardous waste. You are only going to know if you can reduce it and how to reduce it if you know how you're generating it and where it's going. So track your waste management, track your hazardous waste, aim to have zero hazardous waste, engage with your suppliers so that they can reduce the waste that you end up with. You know, if you've not got plastic packaging around things, that can help reduce. Take steps to integrate a circular economic model into your business practices and into your supply chains. Number 13 is in the Sustainable Development Goals is climate action. So I think one of the key ways to do this is monitor your greenhouse gas emissions and aim to reduce those year by year. So if you are not tracking them, you're never going to know if you're reducing them, you're never going to know if you're doing things better. And I think part of the key to this is creating a roadmap to net zero and a roadmap to being carbon neutral. Now, here in the UK, the part of the government that actions transition plan, so and the transition plan task force suggests that companies should be reviewing their net zero roadmap every 3 years. And I think that's pretty good advice. I think that is good practice. So number 14 is life below water. Well, we all want to have a happy, healthy ocean. It's doing things like measuring the amount of plastic debris in the water in the coastal region that's around your marina, taking steps to reduce or eliminate future plastic pollution, developing an eco-based approach to managing the marine area that your marina is located in. And if your country doesn't have an eco-based system approach to managing marine areas, perhaps lobbying your government or your local council to establishing one. So the next slide is SDG 15, which is life on land. Now, this again for hotels and marinas, look at the land around your buildings and around your marina. Is there degraded soil? Is there land that has been affected by droughts or floods? What can you do to improve that degraded soil? Take steps to improve your environment and then calculate the area that has been improved. So these are all some quick and easy wins in terms of how to align yourself with the Sustainable Development Goals. And certainly what I found when in my previous role is that companies that are looking at investing, so asset managers or banks or other firms that invest, they will look specifically at what you are doing. And if you can show that you are aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, that is a big tick if they want to lend you money. So that is one of the reasons, not only that we want to make the world a better place, but if you're looking for investment and you can say to investors, here is how we are aligning with the Sustainability Development Goals, no one's going to get them all right at the moment. So if you can say, this is what we're doing now, and this is what we are planning to do, if you can show you have a clear roadmap, that will go some way to making you more attractive for investors or for banks looking to lend money. Now, the next slide is a very quick suggested kind of a roadmap. So this is how this is what I have done in terms of continually improving. So sustainability, corporate social responsibility, these are not one-offs. This is continuous. You need to continually be looking, what is our baseline? Our baseline this year will not be our baseline next year, will not be our baseline in 10 years' time. And I love the idea of a 100-year plan. That sounds fantastic. So on the next slide, there are the URLs for to access the targets and the objectives that sit under those 17 UN Sustainable Goals. As you can see there, it's available in half a dozen different languages. You can access it in Excel or in PDF. And personally, I prefer to access it in Excel. I map along, I have a column that I map along what I'm doing, what's happening this year. So there's some practical steps about how to implement the Sustainability Development Goals and why you should do so. So some quick takeaways, 3 things you should be asking yourself. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? Once you answer those questions, you're on the way. And if you're looking for a book to read, if you need something to read at the beach, I would recommend Net Positive by Paul Polman. He is the former CEO of Unilever, and he talks about it's not enough for a company to be carbon neutral or plastic neutral. We have to be positive. We have to be net positive. We have to be better than, so that we are leaving the world in a better place than which we have found it. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour through the SDGs, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions in the panel event.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We're almost back on track, and so many inspirational things you touched upon. Look back at your supply chain and try to affect it, try to make the right choice, the responsible choice as consumers, of course, align with the SDGs, be ambitious also with continuous improvement, and do not only strive for neutrality, but also go positive. So those are very inspiring points. Thank you so much for your intervention. And now I would like to introduce the last speaker, Idan Cohen. He's CEO at Pick a Pier and also chairman at the Marine Innovation Association. He will also help us facilitate the panel discussion at the end. So I immediately leave the floor to you, Idan.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. Hello, I'm happy to be here. Hello from Israel. So as you mentioned, I'll start by presenting myself. Marine Innovation Association is a full member in ICOMIA, representing the Israeli boating industry, and also drive the digital transformation that we experience. In terms of Pick a Pier, so Pick a Pier is building the modern digital infrastructure for the boating industry, which is empowering marinas to deliver more welcoming, personalized, and sustainable customer experience. I think one of the reasons we are here today, sort of the partnerships that we had with Blue Flag many years back in time, is that sustainability was at the core of our operation. And the story about Pick a Pier started with the fact that I worked for the company that manages the coastline of Tel Aviv, and we started to see that demand is growing for the recreational boating industry. But we saw that in terms of supply, marinas is really complex in terms of building and planning, and we saw the demand is growing and the supply is remaining stagnant. And what we decided to do is kind of understanding that if we utilize technology, we can help marinas to do much more with what we have. And this is the whole discussion with Blue Flag, the whole kind of the technology that has been built to help marinas to do much more. So practically, I'll speak a little bit more about Pick a Pier and then we'll go to the questions. But practically we have, and this is what we saw, it's a triple-sided marketplace when we see that we need to solve some problems of the industry. So in terms of the consumers, what we have done together with Blue Flag, we've created a code of conduct, which we kind of reduced the bar from the previous code of conduct, because we understood that in order to provide a sustainable sailing approach, we need to move customers to an educative phase of kind of requesting that knowledge about what is sustainable sailing, what is a sustainable marina, because the brand of Blue Flag was very well known in the marina side, in the operational side, but less in the boater side. And this is why we kind of make every consumer, every boater that came on the platform to sign on that code of conduct. And we also created kind of an incentives for these customers to choose the sustainable marinas. So marinas, by using our platform, now I move to the other side, they can do much more with what they have. So a specific marina has a dedicated amount of berthing spots. By using advanced technological tools, they can create new supply that was not visible for them in advance, so they can do much more. It goes to the revenue end line. And my message here is that digital marina, digitalization can be profitable, and this is very important, but digitalization is more sustainable. So I think sustainable equal profitable. And I think this is very important thing that I take from here. And with this, I'll go to the very first question. I'll go to Jeremy, talking from the Travel Foundation. And I think this is really important to understand how we can push forward sustainability in terms of our end users. And I would like to unpack the part of working closely with travelers and travel leadership in an industry which customer is always right. How you can encourage the customers to more sustainable efforts in your industry, or how you can help businesses to encourage that best practice forward. We have Jeremy now. Let's see. In a minute. Okay, I'll wait another second, and if not, I have a prepared question for Elizabeth, and I would like to encourage the audience to send us questions. We have 10 minutes until the end of the session. So until Jeremy comes back to us, Elizabeth, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Good. So thank you so much for the presentation. Really, really exciting. This is our job. So we hear a lot about the marinas, and it was really exciting to see the SDG breaking points into practical guidance. I think this is very crucial to our industry. If we touch upon our industries, from what we know, from what from what ICOMIA know, from what your personal knowledge, marinas have, the most of them, the very, very majority of them have a very narrow margins. How we can help them to address the SDG into necessary profits to make sure that they have the right resources to do that, being a low margin business in that ecosystem and this amount of work that is on their shoulders, how we can push that forward.
That's a really good question, and I think a lot of people are worried that sustainability will mean that they need to spend more money. And arguably, the three pillars of sustainability are environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability. And you need to have all three, and those are people, planet, profit. So it's things like if you can reduce the single-use plastic that wraps products that come to your to the restaurants you have in your marinas, or to the that you are using. If you can reduce that, then you don't have things you need to put into the hazardous waste or into the waste bin. You don't need to pay someone to remove that waste. So that's one of the ways. I think another way that we can look at an industry that has a very low profit margin that wants to remain sustainable is, I think we need to work together. I think companies need to share best practice because that is, one of the ways that we're going to be able to help each other and to improve. So I think that's where trade associations and things like that can be really helpful because you can share what works in one place. That knowledge can be shared and translated into other organizations. So I think that's another key way that we can help each other in terms of sustainability literally not costing the earth.
Thank you. But where do you see, or where do you think, if technology can play a role in addressing these SDG goals in the recreational boating industry as a whole?
Yeah, and I'm really impressed with the work that Pikapera has been doing around digital marinas, digital sustainability, and this is again something that I think once we see implemented can really work. So definitely, I think there's absolutely a place for digitalization. What we are also seeing too with consumers is that younger consumers are far more digitally savvy than their older counterparts. So what we are seeing is when consumers are making a choice about how they spend their money, they are often making that choice by watching YouTube videos, by watching things like that, using TikTok, and then going to a dealership to buy a boat, or then deciding which marina they're going to park up at. So we need to make sure that we are targeting younger consumers in a way that they're consuming information. And as I say, that is in part by being more digitally savvy. So if we are not making those digital options available to younger consumers, then we're going to miss out on the money that they have to spend. And I have a figure here that in the US, about $18 trillion worth of assets is going to be transferred from baby boomers, so that's people aged over 60, to succeeding generations by 2030. So in less than a decade, we are going to see younger people with $18 trillion worth of assets to be able to spend, and that's just in the United States, let alone the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's absolutely great. And you know what? I think, you know, my last question would be, where do you see us in the journey of sustainability? And if you can bring a broader perspective from your whole experience. I think sustainability was really connected in some cases to become sort of a burden. Sometimes it was on the expenses kind of side of the business. I think we feel that change, but where do you see that today? Do you see that as something that is on which priority does it sit, and how do you think we can also become even better in that?
Again, a good question. So I'm definitely seeing firms and companies embracing sustainability more, and sustainability is getting greater traction. What I am finding is a lot of people might say they're a sustainability expert or a sustainability professional, but perhaps don't have the knowledge or the training or the experience. So I think companies need to be mindful that they're not spending money on consultants, that perhaps that money could be spent better or in better ways. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of. But the other thing is, when you look, so I used to work in financial services, and when you look at the direction of travel for financial services, sustainability is now embedded across everything. And banks and lenders and insurance companies are making decisions on where to lend money, who to lend it to, who to insure, how to insure them, at what levels they're going to be provided with insurance, based on what kind of sustainability decisions are being made. So when, and you know, if you want insurance for your hotel or your marina, what protection have you got? What adaptation have you got about floods and droughts and things like that? What these kind of things are, you know, banks and insurers are going to ask companies, what steps have you made regarding sustainability? So sustainability is definitely becoming more and more embedded in companies, and it will continue to do so.
Thank you so much. So let's move to Francesca now. Although we will move to Alessandro, we would like to show the last presentation, and we can wrap up. Or if we have a last question, right? Shira, would you like to Shira, would you like to read one of the last questions from the audience? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
From the chat, they are asking about any sustainable best practice from the hospitality hotel sector for marina managers, catering for customers that all bring their own floating rooms. So is there any best practice that you want to share?
Do you have any comment on it?
That's a really good question, but it's not something that I worked with. As I say, we're a trade association, so we don't deal directly with consumers. But I think it's a good point. I think that any industry is going to have to adapt, and it has to adapt to changing needs and how consumers are interacting in different ways with organizations. And I think organizations need to be prepared for that.
Thank you. One of my key takeaways from Jeremy saying that about the sustainability, sometimes maybe we can rebrand the sustainability. Sometimes the experience of the hoteling industry, which is when it's more circular, when it's more connected to nature, when this is a whole experience, a new experience that we get, maybe something new is happening. And this is why I go out of this session much more optimistic about the future. Just one maybe sentence about the recreational boating industry, which is changing in front of our eyes. Some of the research that we got now with the new generation of boaters, new buyers under the age of 40. So we believe that this is very exciting days to be at sea, at the water. And I think just today I read a research about 20 minutes a day watching the blue water can change your mental mood, I would say. I'll hand to Alessandro to wrap up, and I would like to thank you, all the audience, for being here today. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being in my panel today.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Idan, for facilitating the final discussion. Unfortunately, Henrik had to go to another meeting, and Jeremy had a couple of connection problems, but luckily you had a very, very good sparring partner there with Elizabeth. And thank you, Elizabeth, for the very interesting and inspirational answers. I wanted to thank all the participants to the webinar today for joining us, and we really hope that you take home some interesting messages from this session. I sure do. And I would like to, of course, thank the speakers and Idan and Joaquin and Elizabeth for the incredible contributions to the webinar today. I would like to thank the team, Green Key, Blue Flag, Global Foundation for Environmental Education, for the help setting up the stage for the webinar. And before we say goodbye, I wanted to also take a few minutes to promote the next webinar that is upcoming on the 13th of June. We have Sustainable Management of Posidonia Beaches. I think one of the people organizing the webinar, Mira Husseini, should be here. Mira, do you want to say a couple of words about the webinar?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Mira.
Thank you so much, and everybody, thank you for this really engaging webinar. I enjoyed it very much. So I'm not going to be long, just to let you know that this webinar, with the support of Blue Flag, FEE, Posidonia Network, Mediterranean Posidonia Network, and Interreg Natural Heritage with IUCN, we are organizing this webinar on the 13th of June for anybody who's interested in the sustainable management of Posidonia beaches. So whether you're a destination manager, beach manager, touristic operator, marketing organization, and interested in have access to a Posidonia beach and interested in learning how you can better manage the beach from a rebranding perspective, marketing perspective, attracting new tourists, acting on how to remove it, non-removal, this webinar is for you. So looking forward to having you join us. And if you're interested in learning about the different resources that are out there and hearing directly from different stakeholders, whether hotels, beach managers, municipalities, on the work that's being carried out across the Mediterranean, this webinar is for you.
Thank you, Mira. If you guys want to scan the QR code, you have the registration link there. So we hope to see you at the webinar as well. Thank you again for joining us today, and I wish you all a lovely rest of the week. Thank again the speakers, thanks the participants. Hope to see you soon in the next webinars part of these series. Bye, everyone.
Bye.